My family exploited me for free for 8 years in their restaurant while my cousin did nothing. I saved the business from bankruptcy, but discovered they planned to make him CEO. I sold my stake and left them to fail alone. I'm 34 years old, work in digital marketing for a tech company, and honestly never thought I was going to end up telling this story. But here we are. What happened with my family and the family business basically consumed me for over 2 decades of my life, and only now, like a year after completely walking away, do I feel like I can breathe without that constant pressure in my chest. The thing is that my grandfather founded a barbecue restaurant chain back in the 60s, and throughout my entire childhood, they drilled into my head that this was our legacy, our family identity, and that I had a responsibility to it. You know what I mean? But turns out that responsibility was only for me, not for everyone. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I was like 10 years old and my dad took me to work at the restaurant for the first time on a Saturday morning. I remember being excited. I thought it was going to be a father-son experience, that he was going to teach me the business and all that. And yeah, he taught me the business, but not in the way I imagined. That first day, he put me washing dishes for 6 hours, and when we finished, he told me that's how you build character. That Grandpa had started the same way, washing dishes and cleaning tables. And I believed it, totally believed it, because I was 10 years old and thought my dad knew what he was doing. What he didn't tell me that day was that this was going to become my routine for the next 8 years, every weekend, every vacation, without a single cent of payment. The truth is, at first it didn't bother me that much because I was a kid and didn't really understand what was happening. My friends played soccer on Saturdays or went to the movies, and I was in a restaurant kitchen sweating like crazy and smelling like barbecue smoke. But my dad and my uncle Kevin, who was the co-owner of the business, always told me I was learning valuable skills, that someday all this would be mine too, that I was investing in my future. And I wanted to believe them, wanted to think there was a reason for sacrificing my childhood that way. But then there was Logan, my cousin, Uncle Kevin's son, who was exactly my age. We were born 3 months apart, literally. And that guy never set foot in a restaurant kitchen, not even once during our entire childhood. Logan was, and still is, the laziest person I've ever met in my life. And I don't say that with resentment, but as an objective fact. While I was cleaning grills and carrying supply boxes that weighed like 30 kilos at 14 years old, Logan was at home playing video games or hanging out with his friends. And the craziest part of it all was that my Uncle Kevin talked about Logan like he was the future CEO of the business. Like he'd introduce him at family gatherings saying, "This is Logan, the next leader of our family enterprise." And me there, with hands full of blisters from working so much, and nobody mentioned me at all. My dad never said anything about it, never defended my work or my contribution, just accepted that Logan was the chosen one and I was the free worker. During high school, the situation got worse because I started to understand what was really happening. My teachers would ask me why I arrived so tired on Mondays, why I sometimes fell asleep in class, and I didn't know what to tell them. I couldn't explain that I had worked 14 hours on Saturday and another 10 on Sunday at the family restaurant without getting paid absolutely anything. My grades started dropping. Not dramatically, but enough for my parents to notice. And you know what they did? They told me I had to try harder, that I had to learn to manage my time better. My mom, who was also completely on board with this whole system, told me I was part of something bigger, that family came first, that Grandpa would be proud of my dedication. And every time I tried to protest or suggest that maybe I needed a few less hours at the restaurant, the topic of Grandpa came up, as if his memory was a tool to manipulate me. The breaking point came when I was 17, almost 18, and I started thinking seriously about college. I was always good at marketing. I liked advertising, social media, understanding how brands connected with people, and I thought I could study that in college. But when I mentioned to my dad that I wanted to go study marketing at a university that was like 3 hours away, he got furious. And when I say furious, I mean he yelled at me for like 20 minutes about how I was betraying the family, that the business needed me, that Grandpa had built all this for us and I was just going to turn my back on it. My Uncle Kevin also got into the conversation, telling me I was selfish, that I only thought about myself, that family was always first. And here comes the part that still makes my blood boil when I remember it. While they were telling me I couldn't go study because the business needed me, Logan was applying to universities coast to coast without anyone saying absolutely anything to him. In fact, my Uncle Kevin was super proud, bragging that Logan had been accepted to I don't know how many universities and was going to study business administration to eventually come back and lead the family business. I mean, can you believe it? Logan, who had never worked a single day at the restaurant, was going to study to be the boss, while I, who had dedicated 8 years of free labor, couldn't even consider college because I was selfish. I made a decision in that moment that changed everything. I told them I was going to go study marketing anyway, with or without their support, and if they didn't want to help me financially, I'd manage on my own. My dad literally laughed in my face and said, "Oh yeah, and how are you going to pay for college? With what money?" And I responded, "Well, I'll get a real job, one that pays me. You know how that works." That was probably the first time in my life I talked back to him like that, and you could tell he didn't like it at all. My mom cried, used every emotional manipulation tactic you can imagine, saying I was breaking her heart, that Grandpa would be disappointed, that she hadn't raised me to be so ungrateful. But I stood firm, and at 18 I went to college. I had to get 3 different jobs. I worked at a coffee shop in the mornings, at the university library in the afternoons, and on weekends I did deliveries for a food app. It was exhausting, way more exhausting than working at the family restaurant, but there was one fundamental difference. They were paying me, and I was building my future, not theirs. During those 4 years of college, I barely spoke to my family. My dad would call me every so often to try to convince me to come back, always with the same story that they needed me, that I was making a mistake, that the family business was my destiny. I graduated when I was 23, got a decent job in digital marketing for a medium-sized company, and for the first time in my life I felt free. I was earning my own money, living in my own apartment, making my own decisions without anyone telling me I owed something to the family or Grandpa or the legacy or whatever. It was liberating in a way I can't even explain, but the pressure never stopped. My mom would call me every week, sometimes crying, telling me I was the only one who really understood the business, which was ironic considering Logan was supposedly studying to run it, that they needed me back, that things weren't going well without me. And here's where I made my first big mistake. Well, my second, if you count, working for free for 8 years. After 3 years working in marketing and feeling constantly guilty because of my family's calls, I finally gave in. I was like 26 when I returned to the family business. My dad and uncle promised me this time would be different, that they were going to treat me like a real partner, that they would value my ideas and my experience in modern marketing, that I could implement digital strategies and all that. They sold me a vision of how I could be the one to take the family business to the next level. And I, like an idiot, believed them. The reality was completely different. From day one, they treated me like I was still the 17-year-old kid, washing dishes. Every idea I proposed was rejected. Every suggestion about digital marketing or social media was ignored because that's not how we do things here, or Grandpa never would have done it that way. And Logan, who by then had already graduated from college and supposedly was working in the business, basically did nothing. He'd show up around 11 in the morning, spend 2 hours in his office doing who knows what, lunch for an hour and a half, and then leave around 3 in the afternoon. But in family meetings, my Uncle Kevin talked about Logan like he was the reincarnation of some business genius. I lasted a year in that situation. A year of having all my ideas rejected, of working twice as hard as Logan but getting half the recognition, of listening to how my uncle talked about the future where Logan would be CEO and I would be, I guess, his employee or something. And I quit. I told them I couldn't keep working under those conditions, that if they didn't value my work, then I was going to go somewhere where they did. My dad told me I was a quitter, someone who abandoned when things got tough. And my mom went back to her crying and emotional manipulation routine. But this time it didn't affect me as much as before. I already knew what their game was. I left and went back to digital marketing, this time for a bigger company with better salary. The next 3 years were probably the best of my life up to that point. I was progressing in my career, had my own life, and although my family kept trying to contact me and make me feel guilty, I had already learned to set boundaries. And then 2020 came, and the pandemic basically destroyed the family business. Barbecue restaurants aren't exactly the type of business that works well during a lockdown. You know what I mean? They had to close like 3 of the 5 locations they had. They were losing money like crazy, and suddenly my dad and uncle started calling me desperately. This time, the conversation was different. It wasn't "come help us because it's your family duty." It was more like "please help us or we're going to lose everything." Grandpa would be devastated. "We need your experience in digital marketing to survive this." And I, still with that guilt complex they had implanted in me since childhood, considered the possibility. But I told them, if I was going to come back, it had to be on my terms. No working for free. No being treated like an employee while Logan played CEO. I told them I wanted 40% ownership of the business and full operational control, or there was no deal. It took them like 2 months to accept, and I know they only accepted because they were really desperate. In 2021, I came back to the business with my 40% stake and, for the first time in my life, real authority. And the first thing I did was fire Logan. Sounds harsh. I know. But that guy had been collecting a salary for years without doing anything useful whatsoever, and if we were going to save the business, we couldn't afford to keep dead weight. My Uncle Kevin almost killed me. I literally thought he was going to have a heart attack when I told him. But I had operational control and he couldn't do anything about it. The next 2 years were intense. I modernized the entire system, implemented online ordering, created a loyalty program, improved our social media presence, renegotiated contracts with suppliers, changed the menu to make it more efficient, trained staff in modern customer service, basically rebuilt the business from scratch, keeping only Grandpa's original barbecue recipe, and it worked. By the end of 2022, we were profitable again. We had reopened 2 of the locations that had closed, and the business was in its best financial moment in years. I was killing myself working, like 70 hours a week easily. But it was worth it because I was finally seeing the results of my effort recognized and compensated appropriately. But then I discovered something that basically made everything explode. And they were in the office of the main restaurant and I had arrived early. They didn't know I was there. And my Uncle Kevin was saying it was time to bring Logan back. That enough time had passed, that Logan had matured, and now he was ready to lead the business. And my dad, my own dad, was agreeing. They were saying they could make Logan officially CEO, that I could stay as director of operations or something like that, but that the title and real leadership had to be for Logan because that had always been the family vision. I stood there listening, feeling how all that rage I'd been storing for years came back all at once. I mean, I had literally saved the business, had worked without pay for years in my youth, had come back twice when they needed me, had made the business profitable again with my own effort and knowledge, and they still wanted to put Logan as leader just because he was my Uncle Kevin's son, and because according to them that looked better or something. Truth is, I didn't even go in to confront them at that moment. I just went home, and that night I couldn't sleep, thinking about everything. The next morning, I called my lawyer and told him I wanted to sell my stake in the business. He advised me to think it through. That 40% of a profitable business was a lot of money, but I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to stay in a place where they were never going to truly value me, where I was always going to be the worker, and Logan was always going to be the designated leader, no matter how much effort I put in. We spent like 3 weeks negotiating the price of my stake, and they finally agreed to buy me out for an amount that, honestly, was pretty generous considering the situation. I think they thought that with enough money they could keep me quiet about the real reasons for my exit. I told them exactly why I was leaving. Nothing diplomatic or professional, I just told them everything I had been holding in for years. I told them they had exploited me as a child, that they had emotionally manipulated me my entire life, that they had favored Logan for no reason other than pure nepotism, that they had never truly valued me, and that I wasn't going to stay to watch them give credit for my work to someone who didn't deserve it. My dad tried to defend himself, saying everything they had done was to prepare me, to make me strong, to teach me the value of hard work. And I responded, "No, Dad. What you taught me was that no matter how hard I work, it's never going to be enough for you. And I'm not going to live like that for the rest of my life." My mom, predictably, cried and told me I was destroying the family, that Grandpa would be disappointed. All the usual speech. But this time it didn't affect me because I had already made peace with all of this. I signed the papers, received my money, and left. I haven't spoken to my dad or Uncle Kevin since then. They've tried to contact me, but I just don't respond. My mom calls me every once in a while, still trying to make me feel guilty, but it doesn't have the same effect as before. And here comes the part that gives me a satisfaction I probably shouldn't admit, but it's real. Like 6 months after I left, I heard from a friend who still has contact with the family that they did indeed make Logan CEO. And in less than a year under his leadership, the business already closed 2 locations again. They're losing money again. Staff is leaving because Logan has no idea how to manage employees, and basically they're back to where they were before I came back in 2021. Part of me feels sorry, especially thinking about the employees who are losing their jobs because of Logan's incompetence. But another part of me thinks this is exactly what my dad and uncle needed to understand that you can't run a business based only on favoritism and nepotism. As for me, I'm fine. Better than fine, honestly. I used part of the money from the sale to invest in some things, saved another part, and went back to working in digital marketing for a company where they value me for my actual work, not for my last name or my supposed family duty. I have my own life, my own goals, and for the first time since I was 10 years old, I don't feel that constant pressure that I owe something to someone just because we share blood. I still feel guilty sometimes, I'm not going to lie. That kind of emotional manipulation I received for years doesn't disappear overnight. There are days when I wonder if I was too harsh, if I should have given them another chance, if Grandpa would really be disappointed in me like my mom says. But then I remember all those hours I worked for free as a kid, all the times they put Logan above me for no reason. That conversation I overheard where they planned to make him CEO after I saved the business, and the guilt goes away. I don't have to feel bad for finally setting boundaries and prioritizing my own life. Last week, my mom sent me a long message asking me to come back, saying the business needs me, that Logan is doing his best but needs help. Basically the same speech as always. I didn't respond. And I'm not going to respond, because I've already learned that for them, I'm never going to be more than the reliable worker they can exploit when things get tough. And that's enough for me. Knowing I deserve more than that my work has value, and that I don't have to accept being treated as second class just because someone shares my DNA. I'm at peace with my decision, and that's what matters at the end of the day.